On a scorching July afternoon in the quiet cul-de-sac of Cypress Hill Drive, the air felt heavy enough to chew, and tempers were already unraveling like cheap string. The neighborhood was the kind where nothing ever really happened, until it did. You could usually count on the sound of lawn mowers and the occasional bark of a golden retriever. But that day, what shattered the stillness wasn't suburban bliss. It was the blaring siren of an ambulance, slicing through the heat like a warning shot. And then it stopped, not because it had reached its destination, but because it couldn't get through. Blocking the narrow street, parked diagonally like she was auditioning for an action movie, was a silver BMW X5. And standing right in front of it, arms crossed, expression fierce, was Meredith Cole. Now, if you've never had the pleasure of meeting Meredith, let me paint a picture. She was the self-appointed guardian of order, the kind of HOA chair who cited homeowners for using the wrong shade of beige on their shutters. Clipboard in one hand, iced matcha in the other, Meredith was the queen of this gated kingdom, and she loved her power. The paramedics leapt out of the ambulance, visibly sweating through their uniforms. "Ma'am," one of them called, "we've got a cardiac emergency 2 houses down. We need to get through." Meredith didn't flinch. "This is private property," she snapped. "You can't just enter without clearance from the HOA. You know that." The driver leaned on the horn. The siren wailed again. But Meredith, she stood there like she was defending the gates of Buckingham Palace. "If we make exceptions for ambulances," she said, "what's next? Fire trucks trampling flower beds? We have rules for a reason." Across the street, retired firefighter and Vietnam vet Henry Dawson watched from his porch, gripping the armrest of his chair until his knuckles turned white. The man inside that ambulance, John Baker, had been Henry's neighbor and poker buddy for nearly 20 years. They'd swapped Christmas cookies and fence repair tips, and now he was lying somewhere in his house, barely clinging to life, while Meredith argued about protocol. 7 minutes. That's how long it took the EMTs to reverse, reroute, and circle the block. By the time they got to John, he had flatlined. They brought him back in the ambulance. Barely. But something in Henry didn't come back at all. That night, Meredith went straight to the HOA's private Facebook group and posted, "We had an unauthorized emergency vehicle breach today. A reminder that all emergency access requires prior approval. Rules are in place for our safety." Beneath it, just one comment. "You blocked an ambulance, Meredith." And that was when things started to change. Henry didn't scream. He didn't rant. He did what he'd been trained to do his whole life: investigate, organize, and move with precision. He started knocking on doors. Not everyone, just the ones he knew had been quietly swallowing years of petty tyranny. The folks fined for lawn gnomes, the couple who'd been reprimanded for celebrating Diwali with too many lanterns, the single mom whose kid was yelled at for parking too close to a mailbox. Every story had one thing in common: Meredith Cole. The HOA wasn't just about keeping things tidy anymore. Under Meredith's rule, it had become a tool for domination, twisted by private interests. Her brother-in-law ran the landscaping company that just happened to win every HOA contract. Her best friend ran community wellness seminars that no one ever attended, but somehow cost thousands. And nobody questioned it, because if you did, your mailbox height might suddenly be non-compliant. Henry didn't want revenge, not yet. What he wanted was proof. That came 2 weeks later. when a former board member named Olivia quietly slipped Henry a flash drive. On it, a digital archive from Meredith's HOA email, invoices to fake vendors, payments to shell companies, and then, buried in a folder marked Pool Maintenance July 2023, Henry found something that stopped him cold. Photos, hundreds of them. At first, they seemed innocent. Shots of Meredith inspecting fences, posing near the community flower beds, sipping wine by the pool in designer sunglasses. But then, the photos changed. There she was, Meredith, completely nude, stretched out on a pool float in the middle of the community pool. Multiple angles, professional lighting, weekday timestamps during so-called inspection hours. And yes, those photos had been uploaded directly from her HOA-issued tablet. It wasn't just narcissism, it was theft. The pool had been closed for maintenance the entire summer. Meanwhile, Meredith had turned it into her private boudoir studio, funded by HOA money. Henry didn't call the cops. He called Rena Garcia, a federal auditor he'd once worked with on a fire code compliance case. She flew in the next day. And that's when Operation Red Flag began. Step 1? The receipts. Henry formally requested the HOA's financial records, which they were legally required to provide. Meredith stalled, of course, but the law didn't care about her excuses. When the folder finally arrived, it smelled like mildew and desperation. Buried in the mess were $18,000 in aesthetic enforcement fees, $12,000 for community enrichment events that no one remembered attending, and $14,700 in pool maintenance, while the pool was padlocked shut. Step 2? The sting. Henry hosted a neighborhood BBQ. Meredith, smug as ever, showed up 20 minutes late in khakis, clutching her clipboard like a scepter. She was halfway through scolding a kid for using a non-HOA-approved scooter when Henry stepped up to the mic. "Before we serve dessert," he said casually, "I'd like to share a little slideshow." The projector flickered to life. Slide 1. HOA expenses versus actual amenities. Slide 2. Vendor payouts to companies that didn't exist. Slide 3. A Dropbox hyperlink titled Internal Use Only. Click. Slide 4. Meredith in the pool, completely nude. Timestamp. Tuesday, 2:13 p.m. The crowd went silent. A fork clattered to the ground. A woman gasped. A teenager muttered, "Yo, what?" Meredith lost it. "This is slander. These photos are fake. You'll all be sued." But Rena, standing quietly near the back, stepped forward and calmly said, "Actually, these are verified federal exhibits. And your vendors? All trace back to P.O. boxes under your maiden name." Meredith's face went pale. Her clipboard fell to the ground with a pathetic clack. By Monday morning, the FBI had arrived. No cuffs, no sirens, just 2 agents with a folder, a warrant, and 0 patience. Meredith tried her usual routine: dismissive attitude, legal jargon, gaslighting, but it didn't work on them. They simply asked, "Is this you?" and held up the photo. She didn't answer. The following week, at an emergency HOA meeting, Henry made a motion to remove Meredith as chair pending federal investigation. Hands rose, almost every single one. Meredith didn't speak. She just stood there, shaking. No one helped her out. No one looked away. That night, the neighborhood partied like it hadn't in a decade. No fines, no memos, just hot dogs, laughter, and a handmade sign over the pool gate that read, "Clothing required." Clipboard not. Meredith's home went dark. Her Lexus disappeared. She left a note on the HOA bulletin board. "You've ruined everything. This neighborhood will collapse without me." Someone scribbled under it in Sharpie, "You were the collapse." In the months that followed, something incredible happened. The fences got repainted, not to meet code, but because people actually wanted to. Porch lights stayed on longer. Neighbors talked again. Kids played with chalk on the sidewalks. No one yelled. No one got fined. Henry didn't take power. He shared it. Every Thursday evening, he hosted open porch sessions. No clipboards, no rules. Just coffee, folding chairs, and real conversations. The HOA was rebuilt from the ground up. Transparent budget meetings, no fines without community vote, and a new clause in the bylaws. No rule shall override human decency. And Meredith? Well, she never came back. Her story lives on only as a cautionary tale in a small plaque beside the pool. Cedar Torquet. Power doesn't come from clipboards. It comes from people who remember they deserve to be heard. So, now I want to hear your story. Have you ever dealt with a nightmare HOA? Or maybe a power-hungry board member who thought the rules didn't apply to them? Drop your experience in the comments. And if you've ever seen a clipboard used like a weapon, we definitely want to hear about it. Let's talk.